Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefühl. In what could be increasingly described as being the age of the SUV, it's nice to see that some manufacturers are still putting the time, thought and effort into their sedan lineup. We've been waiting a long time for the update of the Peugeot 508. It's finally with us. We've already had our first glimpse, but now it's time to find out how it drives. We got our first glimpse of the new 508 in Geneva this year, and I think it's fair to say that there are a lot of new features over its predecessor. The styling has been so much sharpened from what went before that it really is making a bold statement. Now clearly we can't wait to find out if the drive is going to live up to the design, but before we get there, let's take a look to see some of the things that have changed. Well, I think the first thing to point out as you approach this car from the front is quite what a bold statement it makes on the road. The angularity and the sweeping lines that you get right throughout the design really let you know that not only is the design fresh, but it's also trying to make a unique statement. I really like this grille. I think it has a really bold place within the front of the design, and there are lots of nice little design tricks that have been used to make the car more useful as well. Look at these headlights. They've been set specifically here within the bumper design to accommodate for the fact that a lot of times you will find you might get a very marginal front impact, and what you don't really want to do is have to replace your headlight cluster just because somebody reversed into you at slow speed. So everything about this car in terms of detail has been that closely thought through. They really did want to reimagine what the 508 could deliver to the marketplace, and as long as it still looks this aesthetically pleasing but is practical as well, I think they might be onto a bit of a winner. Around at the side of the car, it's all changed too. It's 4.75 meters or 15'6" in length, and that's a total 8 centimeters. That's about that much longer. Combine that with a decrease in overall height of about 6 centimeters, that's about that, and what you get is a much more aggressive athletic flank. Now, the car's available in 3 different styling levels. We have the top one, that's the GT, and because of that, we have these 18-inch wheels. What I like about these is that they look athletic and a little bit aggressive without being too overblown. And for me, that really continues the styling of the car through from the front right across the side. So what you get is much more road presence, but not too overblown. Those nice angular lines are continued across the flank. Look at the way that this is sculpturally cut into the wing. Again, it's discreet, but the overall effect that it has is to really make your impression of the car much more dynamic and sporty. The flow of the line comes right throughout the back. Now, this is based on a concept that was a fastback, so you're going to expect it to look pretty elegant, and it does. Question is, are we still going to be able to sit in the back of this car? Well, spoiler alert, we already know the answer, but we'll take a look in a little while. In the meantime, I think you can agree it really does add to the way that the shape flows through to the back. And again, we have those nice chiseled lines coming through into the rear section of the car, making it feel like it's moving even while it's stationary. I wonder if that continues round at the back. Let's have a look. So, okay, I have to start with something of an apology here. Regular viewers may remember when I first took a look at this car in Geneva, and I could have been a bit more complimentary about the rear. Well, brilliantly, everybody stepped up and said how much they liked it. And I've had a good chance to have a think about my initial opinion, and I'm happy to tell you that I can see what it is they like. It's still not going to be quite my taste, but as with the front, I really like the individuality that we've gone for here. Also, as with the front, we have some really nice practical touches. The rear lights here have been placed off to the side, so if you do have somebody bump into you, again, hopefully that means that you're not going to have to replace the light cluster. That's a practical detail in what is quite a visually specific design. All of these horizontal lines that come across compress that back even further. So when you combine that with the low sloping roofline, it really does look very sporty indeed. Whether you like it or not, that's definitely going to be down to individual taste, but I can tell you we have had comments from many people who think that this is fantastic. And when you compare it to its predecessor, I am really delighted to see that Peugeot are taking some bold styling choices. Let's see what that coupe styling's done to the load space inside. Well, I'm happy to tell you that despite the fact, okay, this is embarrassing. Despite the fact that it is a sloping roofline, we still have 1,537 litres of potential load space in here with the seats folded down flat, which I think I can just pop around the side and show you just to give you an idea of what that looks like. This obviously is designed primarily for that really nice aesthetic look. I'm not going to get that one completely down because of Jonas's chair. We'll take a look at that in a minute. But what I can tell you is there's an estate version coming out, and that's going to have 1,780 litres of room. I am really excited to see how the styling is going to work on that larger car. Meanwhile, you have more than enough space back here for anything that you could standardly want to fit. You don't significantly notice how that coupe line has affected your height. If you see right at the back here, where we have a nicely integrated speaker, clearly that's going to be an optional extra. There's more than enough load space here for any even large standard suitcase, so you can fit plenty back here. We've got a nice discreet drop-down panel, which will take all of our spare tools and a little bit extra besides. I like the bifold mechanism on the shelf. That makes things really straightforward to use. We've also got some tie-down points. They're nice and handy. A 12-volt charge socket up here. Always nice to see one of those in the back of a sedan. And a shopping hook over here. Now, we just noticed this, and I think it's an interesting feature to point out. This is an automatic boot, so when you open it, it opens itself, and you can close it. We're all used to touching those buttons, and usually they're black. On this car, it's red. That just takes a little getting used to, because every time you see it, you think, am I contacting any emergency department if I give it a push? Well, not on this car. That is simply for allowing you hands-free to be able to walk away from your vehicle. So I think they've done a really good job of that, because from the back end, it looks like you'd be really limited on rear space. But once you actually open this up, there's more than enough room for almost anything you could want to fit in it. It could be a little bit unfair because I'm not quite sure if this is full production, but I think one of the things that you like about Autogefühl is that we do tell you when we find things and we think, I'm not quite convinced by that. So I just wanted to show you this. This is what happens when you fold up the seat. It just doesn't resonate with the same premium feel that you would expect from this car. That's the noise I think you just heard of how it sounds when you fold it up. Now, I hope when it comes to the full finished production model, that won't be a thing. It's a very small detail, but I hope that's what you like us bringing to you. As we're round at the back of the car, let's take a look and see what the rear seat experience is like for a passenger. Well, the first thing that I'm happy to tell you is that the quality of the fit that you can see evident in the front, and we'll come on to that in a minute, is followed through here in the back. It feels sophisticated, grown up, and there are lots of nice little touches that make you feel that the experience you're having is a little bit premium. I like this detailing on the back of the seats. These cargo nets are nice, they're discreet, but they're very, very practical. And if you have a look on the styling of the door, it echoes everything that you see in the front. Nice chrome effect details, nice subtle fake wood lining, and some nice stitching detail here. This is the GT line. Now in this car, we have the leather seats, but you don't have to go with that. They are an optional extra and they are going to cost you more. Well, we have to talk about it. This is the price you pay for that swooping roofline. I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters in height. And as you can see, well, I'm a little bit stuffed. I would always say, if you're considering any car that has a coupe line, the most important thing for you is who's going in the back of it. If the answer is no one, you can just ignore this, or occasional passengers. It is more than sufficiently comfortable for me to take a ride most distances in this car. I'm really not going to start getting bothered about that until I have to sit in it for more than about 2 hours. If you have children to put back here, again, it's great. I've got 2 power points down here, and I've got my own set of heating and cooling. They're not controllable, but at least that should stop them complaining a little bit longer. The seats are very comfortable, they're very supportive, and it's a very nice environment to be in. I just wouldn't want to be back here with 2 adults for an extended trip. But I think most people ordinarily don't have to do that with this car anyway. Let's take a look inside and see what the changes are in there. Well, I think the first thing to note is how happy that you are that this new stylish makeover has continued with the interior. These frameless windows on the doors really add a nice touch of class, and they're on all four doors, not just the front two. So right from the moment that you open the door on this car, you get a feeling of quality, and that's resonated with all the little details. Jonas has a look at this door. We've got really nice sweeping wood effect lines in here that subtly matches the chrome, and we have ambient lighting strips as well. These chrome effect speaker grills fit really nicely in with the overall design, and the finish on the plastic matches the overall effect very nicely too. Good spacious door pockets, very clean and uncluttered controls, and they're very easy to use. Let's have a talk about the seat. Well, before I even get to that, I really like the chrome Peugeot strip on the door. Again, it just resonates with that quality. Now, we have the leather seats here, but they are optional. You don't have to have them. Are they comfortable? Let's find out. Well, first impression, very good indeed. They really put me where I need to be. My driving position is great within the car. These are fully electric, and I'm very pleased to be able to tell you they're actually really easy to adjust. Some electric seats can be a little challenging. These are not. So we're in the car, we're happy, we like the styling, we're feeling good with our car, and then, wow, that's a real lot of change right in front of us in the dashboard. Well, I think the only word that can accurately sum up the dashboard of the 508 is wow. In an era when it's important to go big or go home, I really respect Peugeot for having pushed out their design language and really making a unique statement. A common criticism that we get with cars in the modern era is that they're just too boring, because once you've arrived at a very effective, very useful design language, there really isn't that much motivating you to want to change it. But with the 508, it's clear that Peugeot really wanted to make sure that they were standing out in the marketplace, and you can see that wherever you look within the cockpit. Starting over here, we have a 12.3-inch driver display, and this is very unusual. We have a steering wheel that's been reduced in size, so rather than looking through the wheel at the instruments, you now are looking right over the top, straight into them. Coming across, we have a 10-inch touch display, which seems to have somewhat unhelpfully decided that now is a good time to switch itself off. Let's see if we can convince it to come back. Let's just turn the car on. There we are. There we are. Now we can get a better sense. And below we have access to all of the most obviously used features. For me, I can't help but find this a little bit reminiscent of the courtroom typing machines. I don't know if you've seen one, but it's very unique styling. Regular viewers will know how much I love my knobs, so I'm very happy to see that we still have a straightforward one for volume controls. Slightly lower down, we have all of these standard touch controls for seat heating, demisting, and air circulation. Coming down into here is one of the first points at which you really notice the design difference in this car. I would say it took me a good 3 minutes to figure out where I should plug a USB connection in to try the Android Auto out. There's actually a shelf that goes right underneath here. And the benefit of that is it does mean you can access it from either side, either as the driver or as the passenger. There are 2 USB charge points down there, one for connecting to the car, one just for charging. And whilst it is very nice that you then have the ability to both get to that, as you can tell, it's not the most natural thing to be able to get to. And it can be a little frustrating, but I do suspect the more that you use that, the more intuitive it would be. I'm absolutely certain that my wife would find that all kinds of useful for storing many things that I knew nothing about until I wanted to put a phone there. There's also an inductive charging pad. Looking back at the main section here, we have a drive mode selector. Now, as you go through the different drive modes, and I'm not sure if Jonas can pan around just to show you how that looks on the screen, the only thing that's a little bit of a niggle when you're driving is that it's not a rotating menu. What that means is you have to go either up or down. So as you select through the modes, you have to know in which order what you're looking for is placed. That's a small detail, and it's actually very simple to find this button while you're driving because there is nothing else here to interfere with it. This gear stick might take you a little bit of getting used to, but it's actually very ergonomic and nice to the touch. In order to put your car in drive in the first place, you have to put your thumb on an unlock button on the side right here. That just lets you know that it's impossible to use this unintentionally. The same is true if you wish to switch it over to reverse. All of that really means two things. First of all, it's very difficult to almost impossible to use the gear selector unintentionally. I like that very much. And secondly, it feels really good and ergonomic. Now, as you can see, we also have, let me pop it in drive just so you can see, a nice green light here that pops up to tell you what you currently have selected. And then of course you put it in park and that lights up too. For me, that's a really nice piece of design. It's simple but very effective, and most importantly, it feels nice to use as well. Slightly further down, we have an electronic handbrake, a nice convenient storage spot on the right hand side with a 12-volt charge point, two cup holders back here, and a central storage area that has more than enough space in it. Very good indeed. And we have the 35mm auxiliary in straight into your infotainment system. So overall, you have to give them credit. They've done an awful lot with the design here. It's all unique and it all feels very specific to this car. And in an area in which a lot of other manufacturers are becoming ever more generic, it's nice to see a little bit of individuality. There are a couple of things that I'm not completely convinced work. For example, over the top of this infotainment screen, we have just a void of blank space. It looks like a really good area just to kind of accumulate a bit of dirt. And we have a long ambient lighting strip across the back. Stylistically, that looks very nice indeed, but I can't help but wonder how distracting is all of that going to be when it comes to driving the car. I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters, and as you can see, although it's a little bit snug, I still have sufficient space to feel more than a bit comfortable. Now, don't forget, this car comes with a panoramic roof, and that reduces your available height by at least an inch. And look at this. Not only does it look really nice and stylish when it's closed, but you get a full, decent, available open space here. And if our summer keeps on being this good this year, I think you're going to be able to make the most of it. Let's take a look and see what's powering our car. Well, look at that. There are two petrol engines available, and we have the more powerful of them here. They're both 1.6 litres, but they come in either 180 or 225 horsepower versions. You can get diesels in either a 1.5 litre producing 130, or 2 litres producing 130, 160 or 180 horsepower. Now, what about the gearbox that delivers that power to the wheels? Well, in all but the lowest of the diesels, it's always going to be an 8-speed automatic. You can have it with a 6-speed manual, but only in the least powerful of the diesel engines. As far as this distribution goes, it's a very nicely laid out engine bay. As to what power actually gets delivered to you while you're driving it, well, I think there's only one way to find that out. We're driving the more powerful of the two petrol engines. It's a 1.6 and it produces 225 horsepower. Well, the first thing to tell you about this driving experience is that the engine is really nicely poised and it works very well in combination with the steering and with the overall stiffness of the chassis. One thing I really like about the way that this car's been put together is that the driving experience really does match the aesthetic experience. When you stand outside of this car and look in, you think, that should feel a little bit sporty, a little bit agile, and give me a little bit of what I want in terms of aggression. And it does. We have different driving modes available to us, which means that we can change up the experience to make it more suitable for whatever it is we currently happen to be doing. Now, on the way over to this location, which as you can see, is really quite woody and nice and actually quite perfect for picking up a little bit of speed in places, I was a little disappointed because I thought that the normal driving mode didn't give me quite the punch I wanted. But I put the car into sport and bang, there it was. Now, in the most basic configuration, the most powerful of the petrol engines should be able to deliver you a 0 to 100 km/h driving time of around about seven and some change seconds. But we have a nicely specced out loaded car here, so we're only looking at about 8, and that's because of the extra weight with the extra features. But I have to tell you, that's more than enough. And in order to give you a feeling of exactly what that means in real world terms, well, why don't we show you? So we're stationary. This is a private road, so we have a good opportunity to see what kind of delivery we can get on acceleration, and we're in normal driving mode. So foot flat to the floor, a gentle pickup, nice engine note, and very satisfactory acceleration. It's not going to rock your world, but it does deliver what you want it to. Now let's change it up a little bit. So you remember me mentioning earlier on that we have the drive mode button here, and at first that seems like it might be a little bit awkward, but if any one of you have ever driven a Mercedes-Benz and been used to the central command console, this actually feels very similar. You put your hand right down on top of the gear stick and then you can flick through the modes. And I have a hunch in this car, that's something you might be doing quite a lot of. It's actually quite pleasurable to make the best of the driving experience by picking it to be right for your environment. So, same road, now in sport mode. Let's see if you can tell the difference. Foot flat down. Well, right off the bat, we have a much more responsive acceleration and a little bit more of that note that we're looking for. So if you got a sense of how long it took me before I wanted to apply the brake when we were in normal mode, I got there an awful lot quicker in sport. Everything feels a bit more agile, and obviously it's a little bit more geared towards your driving experience. Well, this isn't the best road in the world, but even in sport, it's actually a pretty comfortable ride. Peugeot have done a really nice job of managing to match the drive and the handling of this car with the promise that the exterior design makes. So now that we've had the opportunity to have a little bit of the flavour of what the driving modes do, let's talk about the experience of driving this car. Well, I have to tell you, before I sat in it, I was a little bit nervous about what all of this real estate here was going to do to my ability to keep focus on the road. And I have to tell you, it is a little bit, not overwhelming, but slightly distracting, I think would be a fair and accurate description. A lot of that is getting used to it. It is all completely unique, but some of that is in terms of making the experience just a bit more ergonomic and user-friendly. As previous Peugeot owners will know and doubtless remember from older cars, some of those things that you really want to be able to change very simply are still on menus that you actually have to dig through. But you can use ergonomic functions with the digital ones to make life a little bit easier. What am I talking about? Well, that's best demonstrated with the air conditioning. If I want to access that, I have one very simple button here that takes me straight to that digital menu. Now, that's not really as fast as being able to just twist a knob, but the information is very cleanly presented in a very straightforward way. That means when you get there, it is easy to achieve what you want to achieve. On top of that, some of the more obvious and basic functions that you can imagine you want to access are in this lineup below. So I mentioned earlier when we did the interior that you have the heating seat controls, but what's also really nice for Jonas and I, especially on a day like today, is that when we know we want to get nice and cool, we can immediately put the air conditioning on max. There we are. Now that's not the most intuitive thing in the world, but when we want to start filming and we need high quality of sound, so you see what I mean. That's 3 buttons I need to know about in order to make this car function only for the air conditioning. I have to be able to go into the menu, make my changes, and then know where I can switch it on and off quickly and simply. But as you will know, if you're used to driving and owning Peugeot, those things get much simpler the more often you use them. And these keys are actually quite pleasant to use. So when you've learnt which one does what and in what order, I think you're going to find that a pleasant experience. We do have to come, however, to the driver's controls on the steering wheel. Now, they have done a huge amount in design terms to offer you more options than you could possibly ever imagine you could want in terms of this 12.3-inch display. That's all controlled from here, We have a menu that we can scroll through. I can't really recommend that you deal with this while you're driving because there's just so much to pick from, he said optimistically, and it's not going to let me change that right now. Oh, there we go. So I can pick, as you can get a sense here, of the many different options I can have, and they completely change the way in which the display interacts. I also really wanted to show you how long it takes to cycle through that. It's a little bit frustrating. It would be nicer if it worked a bit quicker. Here we are. Let me select the driving display to change. Now, stylistically, that looks nice. But again, when I'm driving, I don't want it to look nice. I need it to work quickly. And that's consistent with both of the digital displays in this car. They are really nice to look at, but they don't do what you want quite as fast as you like. Now, I'm sure that that could be addressed in a later firmware update for the car. So I certainly wouldn't use that as a reason not to buy this car. The controls for the driver's display work really, really well. On the right-hand side, we have the controls for this display, and those menus aren't exactly intuitive. If I push down on this thumb wheel, the only thing that it will bring me to seemingly doesn't actually matter where I am in the menu system, is right back to a list of radio stations. Now, that's nice, but it's not the most important thing in the world that you want to access when you're driving. The shuttle wheel, as you can see, you might think if I put it on to my assistant systems that I would be able to scroll through those, but no, it just takes me back to those radio stations. Now, what I don't know is if that's another setting in another sub-menu that I could access that would allow me to change how that setup works. I'm pretty sure it is, but it's not intuitive and it is going to take you some time to get used to. But honestly, thanks to the individual styling on this car, I think it's going to be quite rewarding for you to spend that time and enjoy getting to know it a little bit better. Now, before we leave again and while we're still stationary, the one other thing that I did want to point out are these paddles. They are large. And again, as with getting used to the system, that means that when you're trying to access these longer stalks, and down here, bottom left, we have the controls for the driving. My mind is gone. Why do I always struggle with this when we're talking about this function? I always want to say autonomous driving. Of course, we're not quite there yet. Cruise control. Thank you, Jonas, for our cruise control features. I would have liked to have seen these a little bit closer integrated to the steering wheel and a little bit smaller. They are very large, and it is quite easy to knock them or select them by mistake when what you really want is the stalks. But the longer you own this car for, the more you're intuitively going to be able to do that. Anyway, that's a bit too much stationary talk for now. I think it's time we took it out for a drive again. Maybe unfortunately you can only get the 508 in front wheel drive, but that does keep things nice and simple. It will be available later on in a plug-in hybrid version. But one of the things I like about this car is the simplicity of the drive approach. It really has been optimized to make sure that you get the best driving experience possible, without it being too overblown in any sense. It feels surprisingly fun for a car of this size to drive, and the ability to switch between various different driving modes really does mean you can get the most out of it that you want. What do I mean by that? Well, roads aren't always perfect and smooth, and it's very nice to be able to have the option to put it in comfort and just enjoy having those bumps sucked up a little bit more. But that said, Peugeot have gone to a lot of work to make this drive feel refined. I prefer to have it in something a little bit more sporty so I can see how the interplay of those components work. The thing that I notice most about driving this car, in all respects, technology and the aspect of physically driving it, is that it rewards you the more that you do it. This doesn't seem like a car that wants to tell you all of its secrets straight off the bat. It really wants you to work with it and learn them for yourself. And personally, I think that's quite fun. So let's have a brief chat about driving position. Well, common problem with coupes is often poor all-round visibility. Very happy to be able to tell you with this coupe-like design that this B-pillar's really been put in a good location, so I have an excellent opportunity to see right the way around this car. There's a lot of glass and it's really helpful to feel that I'm in contact with everything else that's happening in the road. As far as the car itself is concerned, it really wants me to make the most of the driving experience in all capacities. And what that means is when I'm driving quickly, it's enjoyable. When I stop and I just sit and then I have the chance to enjoy the experience of being in the car, that's pretty good too. The seats themselves are very comfortable. However, and I do think it's worth mentioning, that'll be Thomas coming in. I do think it's worth mentioning that they don't offer much in the way of side support. So once you do pick up the speed and you start heading into those curvy roads, you do experience a little bit of roll sitting in the chair. And that's a bit of a disappointment, but there are lots of different areas that you can adjust with the electronic seats, and you could probably improve on that significantly if you're patient enough to find the exact perfect setting for you. It would be remiss of me to do a driving review of this car and not mention the steering wheel. Now, I don't want to be too unfair here. You get used to steering wheels being a certain way in cars, and there's a reason why they're all very similar. It's because that's what works. This smaller wheel is a little bit challenging. The reason for that is you feel like you should be in control of something with huge amounts of power, and of course you aren't. This is a standard drive, but nothing is quite where you expect it to be. Now that has its advantages as well as its disadvantages. The plus is it's a genuine pleasure to be able to access all of your driving instruments without needing to peer through a spoke of a steering wheel. But the cost of that is you do have this slightly peculiar steering wheel with the flat top. Now over time, if you own this vehicle, I'm absolutely certain you get completely used to it. But from first off, it does feel a little bit odd. And when you go into the corners, you are a little worried if you're going to feel as if you have full control over the car. But this is where they've done a very nice job with the ratio on the power steering, because at no point, albeit that the wheel is slightly unusual, do you ever feel anything other than completely in control and completely satisfied with the feedback that you're getting through the system. The braking's really nice too. It's not overblown, but it is very taut and responsive. Overall, I think Peugeot have done a fantastic job with this updated version of the 508. Well, Jonas and I have had a nice excursion in the woods, but we're driving back on the Autobahn now towards Cologne, and that gives us a chance to tell you a little bit about highway driving. Well, as you can hear if I reduce the volume of my voice slightly, the sound insulation in the cabin is generally good, and interestingly, the faster you get, the better the aerodynamics deliver that performance. So you aren't troubled with noise once you start traveling a bit faster. I would say it's best within the 80 to 100 zone. If you're driving a little bit slower than that, you do notice the wind noise more. And you do pick up quite a bit of road noise off the wheels once you get on slightly less well-finished roads. But don't forget, this does have the larger wheels, that's 18-inch, that means we have lower profile tyres, and that does add a little to road noise. But on the Autobahn, it's very well behaved indeed. I have a distinct feeling that I could drive for hundreds of miles in complete comfort with no problem whatsoever. So what do we make of the Peugeot 508? Well, it's actually a really challenging car. Why challenging? Well, there's so much to like and just a few niggles. What's to like? Well, the styling is excellent. It's come on so far from the last 508. You're going to be delighted to own this and really happy to see your neighbours with you parking it on your drive. But of course, that does mean a compromise in terms of rear headroom. Is that a problem for you? Well, that's personal to you. The drive on this car is excellent. The driving modes really deliver well, and that's not always evident in all cars. Now, that said, obviously, we do have the most powerful petrol engine, and I think to get the most out of this car, you want to be looking at one of those bigger engines to deliver what you really want when you're driving it. Now, let's talk a bit about pricing. Well, here's one of those minor niggles. Entry-level price, really nice, comes in around about 31, but once you start equipping it, well, we have the GT line. That means more powerful engine and lots of bells and whistles. And that puts this car at 51,000. And at 51,000 euro, you have a lot of different choice. I don't think we needed to go with quite everything that's on this car. So you could nicely equip one at 46, and that's a more reasonable price level, I think, for comparison. In terms of the car itself, the drive is excellent, and I think it's going to put a smile on your face. I have to take my hat off to Peugeot in terms of what they've achieved stylistically with this, not only in terms of the aesthetic, but also in terms of the drive. They've asked themselves at every stage, why? Why should it be like that? Just because that's what other people do, or just because that's what we've done before? Why should we do it again? And that's resulted in a car that is definitely exciting. Some of the things that drive you absolutely nuts the first time you take this car out may very well be the things that you absolutely adore about this car after you've owned it for a while. So I would really encourage you not to be too put off just because of the uniqueness of the styling and the way that some of the features are accessed and used while you're driving it. At the end of the day, a car is about one thing more than any other, and that's the driving experience. And I am delighted to be able to tell you that Peugeot have really delivered with the 508. This thing doesn't just look as if it belongs in a now higher bracket, but it drives as if it belongs in a now higher bracket. And I think that really is quite a lot for them to have achieved. Please let us know what you think. Tell us in the comments below if you have any questions, anything we didn't cover. Please let us know. Please subscribe, and we hope we'll see you again soon.